Welcome back to the Avoiding Average podcast, friends. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Audrey Rose, who went from being a super burnt out registered nurse to a powerhouse holistic coach, found her way out of burnout and into a life that she loves through somatic practices. Now, Audrey has a ton of wisdom to share in this episode, and so I hope you enjoy listening to her. But I did want to call out that we had some technical issues along the way, and my voice ended up coming out really garbled in most of the recording, so I apologize for that. But hopefully, that won't take away from the message that Audrey has to share. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy, and let's dive in. All right. Hello, and welcome back to the Avoiding Average podcast. My name is Susan Gates, your host, and today I am really excited because we have another guest, and her name is Audrey Rose. Audrey is a holistic life coach, a somatic healer, and a registered nurse who helps high-achieving women regulate their nervous system and find happiness again, which is fitting because she is actually hosting the Rise Happiness Summit coming up in July that I'm going to be a keynote speaker at. So I'm super excited about that. And she's also the host of a top ranked podcast called Ready to Rise and also the founder of the Rise Sisterhood. So basically, all around a powerhouse woman. So, Audrey, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I just had you on my podcast and now I get to be here and I'm just so excited. Thank you.
Yes, likewise. I really loved our conversation on your podcast. So I'm excited to continue this on, but then also learn more about you
Yeah.
because like everything that you put out there, I'm like, oh, yes, like, yes, girl.
Oh, thank
So
you.
yeah. So I'd love to hear like a little bit more about, you, your background, how you got into holistic life
Yeah.
coaching.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Try to keep the short version, but my gosh. So truthfully, like I think my whole life I kind of struggled with some anxiety, some depression. I literally diagnosed anxiety with depression. So it's, a thing. But
Mhm.
like all of the things and I got into a huge personal development journey about 9 years ago now. And, I learned so much and I had, all the mindset hacks and all of these great tools. And so things were really good. And then just like everybody like has like a pandemic story, like the pandemic hit. And as a nurse, I was, or I still am like a float nurse. And for any nurses listening, you already know like the float nurses kind of get stuck in whatever department like needs the most help or whatever is happening. So when the pandemic hit, I had to like literally take over this whole COVID pop-up unit. And it was like I became one of the lead nurses on it. And so I was like one of the people like in charge. And it was just so much work. Like it was literally just never ending. And at the time I didn't realize like how kind of burned out I was starting to get or how much like this was going to affect me or impact me. And I remember my mom telling me, like, you can work this much, or yeah, it's like great, like you're helping and it's really important, but like don't get burned out. And I literally was just like, "What? Like, what? No, like I'm gonna be fine." Like, because the adrenaline, like I was just running on a pure adrenaline. I would like wake up at 4 a.m. and do like a huge like workout and, have my smoothie and my water and all that cool stuff. And then I would go to work and do this 12-hour shift of like really intense back then. Like at the beginning into like the middle of COVID, it was super intense. I mean, it was like really, really sick people. And so, doing all of that, and then I'd come home and sleep and then do it all again. And I would work like a normal average, shift for a nurse is the 12 hours, but usually about 3 days a week. Some people pick up four, it depends on where you work. But I would do like 6 days in a row. And then I was like, oh, I'm crushing it. Like, let me do 9 days. And my like record was I think the longest in a row was like 13 or something crazy, which everybody out there is going to be like, yeah, that's so unsafe. And it was okay, like, it was sustainable for that period for me because I had nothing else going on. Like, I would just go work and come back home and sleep, I had nothing else going on. But obviously, now that I look back, I'm like, that was way, way, way too much. Like, there's no way that I could do that again. So, yeah, I mean, it led to a major burnout in my life. And, of course, like, it was like a massive burnout. Do not recommend. Like, I think we can talk about this later because now this is like the long story. But I think that there's so much pride as, an ambitious woman or a high achieving woman. And in healthcare, it happens as well in healthcare where there's like this pride or there's like this just we just feel so proud of ourselves when we work a lot or when we're like, it almost becomes like this like badge of honor. Like I did this many shifts in a row or I did this much. And at the time I kind of felt like that. Like I'm doing all of this and hold on, like I'd never slowed down until it was kind of too late. So all of that brought me in, and we can talk about the signs and everything I went through. But yeah, like this whole massive, massive burnout. And so now I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's look at like the somatic practices. Let's control, like our lifestyles a little bit more. Let's regulate our nervous systems and all of that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. I know that nurses already have it rough in a sense just because it's a very physically demanding job. But
Yeah.
then on top of that, like doing the long shifts or even overnight shifts, it becomes
Mhm.
really hard on your body. And so I can only imagine like doing 13 days in a row. That's wow.
Yeah. And like I still am just like, damn, like at that time I remember thinking like, oh wow, I remember feeling really like proud and really just like, well, that's so cool. Or, um, it's like this prideful thing. At a lot of hospitals, you'll see like, and the culture is really changing, thank goodness. But when I started, I mean, it was like a prideful thing to like refuse your breaks and to be like, no, I'm a really good nurse. Like, I don't need to take breaks. And it's just so crazy now because I'm like, I experienced that culture and I have seen the shift to now where I see at my hospital, like, everybody like they demand their break, like what time is my 15-minute break, so it's really cool to see that change. But yeah, I mean it was a lot. Yeah. And I'm like, do absolutely do not recommend. I'm like, that was like that's not something now. Personally, how I feel is I'm like, that is not something to be proud of. That is like super burnout. Like we don't want to be proud of that anymore.
No, I agree, and I'm glad that you were able to like step away from that because I think that that mentality extends out into several different industries besides like the nursing or medical industry. Like I remember I would eat my lunch at my desk every single day, like just because I was like, I need to get work done, I need to be productive and
Yeah.
whatnot. And it's just so
Yeah, like
ridiculous to
look how
think about
productive
now.
I am.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I mean, so you recognize then that like, you were burnt out. What did you do next, or what did you do after that?
Yeah, so what happened when and like I was saying, like I realized late and we were just talking off air about like how, right now I'm working a lot again and how I'm like recognizing the symptoms earlier. And it's just really I think it's just really important to like start to recognize those symptoms because of course this was my first time really struggling with burnout and so I
Yeah.
didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what was happening. And so what happened is yeah, I caught it really late and at that point, I mean, I just couldn't even function. Like, this was like the tail end of COVID when our unit closed down, and then kind of, COVID wasn't such a big thing anymore. It was like a couple people in the hospital had it. That was about it. And um, at that time, I mean, I finally, like, my body finally was just like, took that exhale and then it was like, "That's it." Like, that is it, like, the end of the finish line, like, we're down, like, we're just not getting up. I couldn't get off the couch, I couldn't get out of bed, it was, just too much. So, the good thing was I had been speaking with a doctor, throughout this time, a nurse practitioner, and really she had told me, like, she had really, shown me that I was facing the burnout. She kind of pointed out the symptoms and that kind of thing. And and so she was like, "Okay, just as soon as you are ready, like, as soon as we need to, like, let me just write for you like a stress leave. Let me just write for you like some type of leave from work because you absolutely need it at this point. Like, there's not really going to be the ability to recover while working full time because you're kind of too far gone." So that's what I did. I took 3 months off. And what's crazy is when she first offered me like a month off. And she's like, let's just put that in the system. We'll do like 1 month break. And I remember thinking, Like, that's way too long. I can't be away for a
Really?
whole month. A month is too long. Yeah, at the very beginning, I was just like, "That's too much. Can't do it." And I felt really guilty, and I felt just even shame that I, like, had to take a month off. And it, thank goodness, extended to 3 months, and, when I went back after that, I still wasn't fully back. I mean, I still wasn't fully back to normal at all. And so that was the very first thing I did was just rest, and I remember her telling me very specifically, she was like, "You can't do anything else." Like, for a couple of weeks. She was like, "I don't want you to try to be productive. I don't want you to try to, like, do some kind of, like, whole, 30-step routine to, like, heal yourself." She's like, "I want you to, like, sit on the couch, watch whatever you want, sleep whenever you want, and, like, that's it." So that was the first thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. And I'm glad you mentioned that story because when it reminded me of my most recent pregnancy, I had low iron and I
Mhm.
think I was honestly really burnt out too.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking basically a month and a half off before I delivered. I took it as medical leave and like I
Yeah.
similar sort of thing. I felt really guilty and I felt really shameful, like telling people that, oh,
Yeah.
I need to take off. I won't be here. And on top of like the maternity leave and everything like that. And so I was out for a really long time, but I basically did just that. Like I spent that time just sitting on the couch watching TV. I think I binge watched Bridgerton,
Good.
just like,
Good.
but it was
Good.
I think it was probably the best thing I could have done for me, myself, and my daughter. And so I'm glad that you took that for yourself and you had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I know, thank goodness, like, and now now I'm, like, the one at work that people will ask, like, "Wait, how do I do that?" or "How did you figure that out?" And so that's really good because, I just want everybody to, like, experience that if they need to, like, just take a step away.
So you had taken this time off and allowed your body to basically just recover in a sense, and it still really wasn't enough. What led you down the path of like somatic healing practices?
Yeah, okay, so oh, I've never actually answered this question before.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, which is really cool, like, in this way. So what happened is I honestly was starting to go to therapy because I was like, that's always the first step, right? And I love therapy, but like nothing was really helping because I kept learning a lot of mindset tools. I kept buying all the books and the, mindset tools and that kind of thing. And I was like, it just nothing's clicking to make me actually feel better. And what's crazy is I was doing, like, the really like, the trendier things and the things that do bring us a lot of health and, vitality in our life with, like, the green smoothies and the workouts and stuff,
Mhm.
but I still just, like, wasn't feeling like myself. And I remember, like, I tried to keep going back to the old tools that I had learned, like, that 9 years ago, when I very first started a personal development journey, or I very first kind of got into this, and nothing was, like, working. And so I actually met somebody, because I was like, "The therapy is not quite working. Let me try, like, a less traditional approach to therapy in general," because I was having a lot of other just kind of issues, like dating issues and stuff like that. And so that's really how I landed into it, which I think is really funny, is like really through like the dating stuff. I was like, hold on, let me like this girl, she's like a kind of like a self-love coach. And what was really cool is everything that she taught was all somatic practices. And I didn't even really register that right away. She didn't market herself as like a somatic coach or anything like that, but she would teach me these like body practices, and she'd even do it with me, like, like during the session, like she would literally teach me like, no, like move this way or do this, or um go try like a sound healing, or like do an EFT tapping, and like send me like a YouTube video that had like a really good tapping session. And that's how I got into it. And I literally didn't even understand, like, at the beginning. I just thought, this girl's kind of like woo woo, I'm like, okay, I'm into it. Let's try it. But I was like, I don't know if this is like the right thing. Like I was like very like just, a black and white person. I was like, what is this? And over time, like I went to the first sound bath and I was like, that's super weird, but I like it. Like, let me try it again. And then, the more and more that I started like on this journey of doing all these different tools and doing all these different things, they all, I kind of took the ones I liked, left the ones I didn't. And then, yeah, eventually I got certified myself in a few of them and like haven't looked back since.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what are some of your favorites then? Because I believe you do. I see your bowls in the background, so some sound healing.
That's like my number one. It's just so like I have 3 that I use a lot and like we've talked about, I know you're into a lot of them as well. But like I really like have looked up a lot of the research about how, like what's like kind of some of the faster ways. And so EFT is like one of the fastest ways, breath too, but like EFT tapping is one of like the quickest ways to reduce our cortisol levels. Just a quick, easy like, and I think what's cool about EFT is it blends in some of like the affirmation part. So you feel like for somebody who's dipping their toe in, it kind of feels like you're still doing the mindset part that we traditionally know to like help us through a situation. So I think for me, that was a good like first one to really like be like, okay, kind of a little bit, easier to do. And then sound healing, I just fell in love. Like I have 2 different sets of bowls and I'm just like obsessed with like I'll like pull them out. Like my neighbor probably thinks I'm crazy because I know they can hear them sometimes. But I'm just like I will pull them out at like random times and just sit here and just vibe with my bowls. Like there's nothing like it. Like it just puts you into that like meditative state. You're not thinking about anything. You can't really think because the way like I don't know, the sound waves just kind of like just alter your, your brain like where
Yeah,
you're not thinking about stuff. So that and then breath work. I love breath work. It just I don't use breath work as often as the other two, but breath work is one that I like too.
that's awesome. I find it funny, like the EFT. I remember my cousin had introduced that to me
Mm,
a little while ago, and the first time I heard about it, I was like, "What is this? Like you have to tap
yeah.
yourself?"
Yeah, you're like, "What?"
It took me a while to get on board with that one.
Yeah.
And then sound healing, I think that was the last one of those three that I had tried.
Oh, funny.
It was when I was traveling in Thailand, and I was like, you know what, I've never done this. I'm going to try it, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was
How cool.
I I don't know. I've always loved music and everything, so it makes sense that that
Mhm.
was something that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
But do you find people who don't really resonate with sound healing?
Actually, I haven't. I haven't really found anybody that doesn't like it. I know, like, I was talking to somebody recently about how, like, your first sound bath, like, if you were, like, thinking too much during it or, like, trying to, like, shut off your brain, because like, I think sometimes for those of us who are, like, really, like, when you're not the one playing the bowls, it's like a little bit it can be a little bit less meditative at first until you really, like, just let yourself just chill and just listen. Um, and for a lot of us, it's like we're trying to just do or think continuously. So, like, if you don't, like, open up to the sound and, like, just let it do its job, then, you might try to, like, override it continuously. So, I know for me, my very first sound bath, I had that experience, but I haven't had any, like, clients or anybody tell me that they didn't. What I have had, on the other hand, is super cool is the very first time that I played for, just like public, like for anybody, I played at one of my retreats. Like it was so like scary for me. I'm like, oh, the very first time, and it's like at my retreat. But I had been, like practicing forever and all of that. And all of the girls the next morning told me that they had the most vivid, beautiful dreams that like they've ever had before. And it's so that's been so cool is I've gotten that feedback a few more times since then too, where people will be like, I totally saw my like highest self and like I was like living as her and like the dream that they have is just so like beautiful and like powerful. So yeah, on the other hand, I've had that, which
That's
is like
amazing.
so like cool. I know. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Like the what
Yeah.
kind of demonstrates the power of sound healing in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel like I had a little bit of the opposite experience with it.
Oh,
Like it not necessarily that I had any bad dreams or anything like that,
sure.
but I think what it did was actually shook me up a little bit in a sense, in the somatic sense, and like helped me get rid of
Yeah.
like things
Get
that I
some
was
stuff
holding on
out.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of cool. Like I guess it was the first time where I felt really truly felt like energy in a sense moving through my body and like with the frequencies. And so yeah, it's
Oh my God,
fascinating
I
to me.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why too, like, little plug, like with any of this work, it's like that self-care is so important. Like just drinking a lot of water and electrolytes and like flushing all of that out. Like, because it really does. Like, I was so skeptical. Like, I'll be completely honest. My very first sound bath, I walked in and I was like, what is this like hippie stuff? Like, I don't know. I was like, what is this? And then now you come to my house and it's like, hippie land over here. But like, I was like, what is that? How can some kind of sound, like different types of sound, like I use bowls, but there's so many different tools. But I was like, how does this sound like work? Like, what? Like, how? I don't understand. And yeah, I know. It's so cool. Like, it really does. Like, it literally can like break up like these different, like the stuck energy or like little, like toxins that are like stuck in your cells. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty cool. And I think it's like, I don't know if it helped the fact that it was like a private session. And so she was like basically
Cool.
all up in me, my space.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so
but
good.
yeah, it's just fascinating to me. Like, and it was something that I started to dive into as far as like looking at, the different frequencies. And so
Mhm.
um, I know that their different frequencies correlate to like different chakras or like
Yeah.
different I don't know, states of being in a sense, I guess. So
Yeah.
could you kind of explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the bowls themselves are tuned to different frequencies and they can mimic like I guess different frequencies, right? There's frequencies of everything like around us. So for me personally, the ones that I use are like the 432 hertz. And that's like all of mine. I think I have one that isn't, but all of mine are that frequency. And just I chose it specifically just because that's supposed to mimic the frequency of nature. And so like for, nervous system regulation and all that, it's like, so grounding. But then each bowl has like a different tone. So based on like the size, and I think it's mostly related to the size, if I remember correctly. But the different tones do relate to the chakras, so I'd have to pull up my chart because I like can never memorize them. But like for
Sure.
example, like the biggest one that I own, which is like massive, it's a C note. And so that one is like for the root chakra. And so different bowls, like you'll see some sound healers, pull out all 7 of their bowls and like do a full chakra, bath, right? Or when I play them, I usually play like just maybe 3 or so. So it's not too overwhelming on our system, but I'll play about 3 at a time and then I'll select them for those certain things. Like I just did a happiness one inside my like membership, and I was like, okay, let me do like a happiness sound bath. But I did a little bit of like the, crown chakra and third eye and then throat so that, we're like those specific places, like I want to balance those or open those chakras because like a lot of happiness, can relate to if those are open or closed, that kind of thing.
That's amazing. I love that you're able to bring that into like the work that you do in your membership, but then also
Yeah.
in you had mentioned your retreats too. So
Yeah.
you you've got all these things going on, which is like amazing to me. Like I'm like, oh wow, I aspire to be you. Like, there's and
It's so
it's so
fun.
cool to see how you're able to help so many people through these different
Yeah.
methods. So like
Yeah.
what inspired you to go down the route of, the retreats? And then also the summit as well.
Oh my gosh. So it's like one of those like super woo woo answers. And I swear. So I like the more that I got into like somatic healing and my burnout recovery and all of that, I've gotten a lot more intuitive just in general. Like I think because you slow down and you get more tuned in and you can hear like, the universe or whatever, or like see the signs and like I know it sounds so woo woo for like the high achiever, who's listening, but it's the coolest feeling. Like when you are like just on a walk and you just like literally see like a feather come down and you're just like, and you have that like intuitive moment where you're like, oh my God, like I swear that's like, my aunt who's passed away. I swear she's like sending me a message. Like I don't know. It's just such a cool thing. So I had a podcast is how everything started. And then I doing these tools for myself and getting like certified in a couple of them and all of that. And I was like, I kept hearing the word retreat, which is why I'm like, giving this whole backstory, but I kept hearing the word in my own head. And I was like, what? Why am I hearing this word? And then I kept hearing people say it like in conversations or, scrolling IG or whatever. And I'm like, wait, retreat, retreat. I was like, okay, I guess I need to like host a retreat. And it just kind of literally came on my heart where I was like, I've got to do this. And I had no idea. I was like, how, like, I have no idea how to do this. And then of course, one thing led to another, just like always. And I met a business coach who was like hosting her own successful retreats and we linked up and I worked with her for a few years and she helped me really like figure it all out. Like she literally came to my first couple retreats and like helped move furniture around and like help me do everything. And it was so cool. And
It's
then the
amazing.
summit came after that, probably a year later, where I was like, not everybody can come to these retreats financially, just physically leaving their kids or whatever. And so I was like, let's do something that's, virtual, complete, like kind of like a virtual retreat, but, everyone calls it a summit. But there's some of the healing tools, not as much because I can't like lay everyone down and do a, bunch of like intuitive, workshops, but I do like some of my practices that I would do at a retreat. And then I also bring in guests like I would, and I bring in like a bunch of guests because I can, because it's virtual and like it's easy to do that. And so then I get to have like so many amazing speakers like you come in and share and teach. And honestly, it's something that I've really like fallen in love with, something that I'm super passionate about doing because it's just accessible for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I think that's like honestly something that a lot of people who get into the coaching industry struggle with is because
Yeah.
like we all get into it to help people.
Yeah.
And then the reality is we also need to make money too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like we all kind of get to a point where we're like, okay, how do we help as many people as possible without completely burning
Yeah.
ourselves out or suffering in a sense because of it?
Yeah. I think like really just keeping it aligned, like listening and saying no when there's because we want to do it all too, so it's like, but saying no to some things too. And just, yeah, like taking care of ourselves, taking care of our energy.
Yeah, yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that like you tend to focus on like high achieving women
Yeah.
and basically helping them using somatic practices. And so could you just like briefly go over like what themes do you seem to come up often for people who may find themselves in that category?
Yeah. So a big one is like not wanting to let go, or like how we talked about, like feeling that shame if we step away, feeling that shame if we're not being productive every single minute of every single day. And I think something that I've had to work with a lot of people on is really just kind of showing how it is productive to take care of ourselves. Like that's like the most productive thing you can do is slow down and really like, practice some of the tools. And it doesn't have to take hours and hours of our day. And, we don't have to like quit our job and go live at the edge of the forest, right? Like that's like the biggest thing that I like to share is, it doesn't have to be some scary overhaul, but really like slowing down and taking our time and, doing some of these practices so that we really can have more capacity for a bigger life when we practice the nervous system regulation. Like I like to explain it almost like a rubber band. Like the nervous system is meant to like stretch and, be activated and do all these things and have that fight or flight type response, but it's also meant to come back and, rest and just chill. And we can like have so much more range to like just have the capacity to do more in our lives truly and to like accept more and live a really fulfilling life if we practice that regulation. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing is just explaining that and just being like, no, like like take 1 hour, like where you really do like do something for yourself And that doesn't mean that you're not being productive. That really is the most like productive thing you can do.
No, I fully agree with that. I think there is, um, it's a lesson I've learned many
Yeah.
times in my
Mhm.
life of always kind of coming back to, filling your own cup before helping others, because you're not going to have any bandwidth to help anybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's amazing. So, you know, you have the podcast, you have your coaching, you have the nursing, you have the summit, and you have your membership.
Yeah.
How do you manage it on a day-to-day basis? Like I love that you're doing all that, and I love that you are showing that it's possible to do
Yeah.
everything that you want to do and maintaining, that regulation and taking care of
Yeah.
yourself. So I would love, like,
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
You know what what I do a lot of is time blocking, and that's really been like time blocking and like just batching certain things. And part of me is like I would love, and it's something that I even do teach, is literally like a routine, right? Like our nervous system really loves routines. And so if I had a job with like kind of set hours every day or something like that, it would be easier to have like an actual routine. But I'm doing the next best thing because of the 12-hour shifts, and I work night shift right now, which is like so
Yeah,
horrible.
throws you
Um,
off.
it's yeah, I hate it. It was an accident that I accidentally got myself here. But anyways, um, so what I'm doing, yeah, is like the time blocking. And it's I think a routine, like to be completely transparent, I think a full-on routine is like the best, but this is definitely second best. And so on my work days, like if I'm in nurse mode, then I'm just in nurse mode, right? Like I'm literally, have my little routine, my 12-hour shift, and then, I like might wake up and do some like somatic healing or some tapping or do it like on my break or something like that. And I really try at work to practice like just very simple breath work, like a box breathing or something like that. I literally will go like to the bathroom just to do that sometimes in between like situations. Just because like it's so important. Like if I'm working a few days in a row, I have to like down regulate my nervous system after it's like getting hyped up, from a crazy situation, right? So that's like how I do those days. And then on my days off, like if I'm in, like business mode or, like retreat mode, that kind of thing, I block things there too. And so like I'm like batching my podcast recordings or batching my editing or stuff like that so that I have like that capacity to, kind of live, have my time off, have my downtime, like be able to hang out. And so I have like kind of non-negotiable work and non-negotiable like play time.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I think that's a great way of looking at it. Because me, I'm not like a huge fan of routines. I don't know why they always felt really restrictive to me, but I think in a way of like batching or blocking off time in a sense that way, that makes
Yeah.
a lot more sense and a lot easier for me to
Yeah.
get on board with, because it's like I like some freedom to
Yeah.
go about my day too,
Yeah.
and having those time blocks makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. It's
Totally.
amazing.
Makes sense.
Um, so I know you have the podcast that I was on recently, which I loved. I think you're a phenomenal podcast host, so I appreciated that.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
I how has that journey been like for you? Because I know that there are a lot of people out there, even guests that I've had on before that have been like, I really want to do a podcast, but I don't even know where to start, and I'm still in the early phases figuring things out, right? And so,
Yeah.
as somebody who has, it's over 300 episodes now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think we're about to hit it. Yeah. It's been well, so it's been 4.5 years. So like first, like there's that because like you can't get to like I see some people who are like, I want to be like at 300 episodes and I want to be like in a, higher percentage, or I guess, yeah, like higher percentage is the right way to say. But, and then they start doing like daily episodes, right? And they're like, I've seen a few people do that. And I'm like, you are going to burn yourself out and burn your audience out. Like, what's the point?
yeah,
So, time, like, really, it is time. But when I first started, I actually wasn't even gonna do this, which is crazy. A friend of mine, she just was like, "Hey, like, Keisha. It was Keisha Get Married, and now it's Keisha Fitzgerald. But oh, other way around, excuse me. She was Keisha Fitzgerald back before she got married. But she was like hosting this podcast, like, episode this not episode, this whole podcast, like teaching program course. And I had been listening to her podcast and I really liked it and I thought it was really fun. And I like really wanted some place to showcase. Like I was just kind of starting to feel a tug to showcase some of the things that I had been learning and just so other people could just learn from what I was doing. Like literally like what to expect at your first sound bath and how you might feel and how it's going to be. Like I really wanted to share this with people so that if they were starting a healing journey, they would know, like, don't be scared. Don't be afraid to go into Barnes and Nobles and buy the book. Like, let me hype you up, right? And so that you wouldn't like chicken out of things like I almost did. So, yeah, long story long, I, found out about her program. My friend told me about it, and I tried to convince her to do it with me. I was like, let's do a podcast together. And she was like, like, no way. Like, I don't have time. I don't have energy. Like, but you should. Like, you're such a talker. She's like, you should. And so I did it. I ended up doing it. And like, yeah, so it's been 4 years and it's been so fulfilling. Like every time that I have a conversation like this, right? It's like you walk away and you're like, wow, I learned something new. I learned about somebody else's perspective. I got to like experience, like, I just had somebody on who taught some of like the different polyvagal, like, exercises or healing modalities that I had never even heard of, like safe and sound. I think it's called Safe and Sound Play. Anyways, just stuff that I never even heard of, didn't even know about. And it's like connections like this, like how, like we did not meet, like we met to do like some podcast episodes and like, otherwise who knows if we would have like had this conversation. Like you're not going to like stop in the grocery store and like have this conversation, right? So I just, yeah, I found that like so fulfilling. Like I love it. So I say if anybody's like just starting out, like don't forget why you want to do podcasting. Like I used to have a sticky note right by my computer that said, like, if I just help one person, like if I help one person find her way or like, try something new, like that would be very meaningful to me. And now the podcast is reaching like 58 different countries, which is insane. And so like truly just remembering that why, because that's like all I care. I just thought about that one girl like every time I would record and it grew.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's a great way of looking at it too, because I think in anything that you do, anything that you put out in the public, there's always some metric attached to it,
Yeah.
right? Like on Instagram, on threads, or, even
Mhm.
in the podcast world, like you get
Mhm.
the metrics of how many people listened or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to get wrapped up in that. And so going back to, the reason why you're doing it is so important. And it's funny because I feel like I just recently did an episode on knowing your why
Yeah.
or just in general. And so it's funny because it's so true though. Like if you are very clear on what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, it makes it
Yeah.
a lot easier to keep showing up and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
uh, yeah. So it's been, you said 4 years now?
Yeah, 4.5 years.
How has it evolved like through that time? Because I imagine it's not the same as it was when you first started.
Honestly, I'm like, I feel like it's very similar. I did add, like, for a little while there, I did, like a Sunday Scaries, like a series every Sunday.
Okay.
And then that kind of, I was like, okay, I can start dropping like 2 episodes a week. So I'm still doing 2 episodes a week, but I guess like that would be how it evolved, was doing like little things here and there, like little series like the Sunday Scary series, because I was like, I'm feeling the Sunday Scaries, so like let's talk about this. And then I did that for a while, and then now like the happiness challenge that you're a part of, like that's like literally currently airing. So that was really fun. So like little series like that. But I've always done a good mix of like solo episodes, which I like, but I really do love the interviews. So I've always done like a mix of both of those. Like I just love interviews and like just chatting and hearing other people's like thoughts and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I started off doing a couple of solo episodes, then I started doing the interviews, and I found out I really did love that. Like, I love connecting with people. I love hearing
Yeah.
about them and like just hearing what they have to say. Because
Yeah.
similar to you, I like to learn new things too, and so I've learned a lot
Yeah.
through it as
Like,
well.
oh,
So
yeah.
at the very least, it's like you make a connection with somebody that you probably wouldn't have done before, because even in
Yeah.
online spaces, it's really hard to get that deep into a conversation with somebody like on threads or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like a sentence here or
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah, and, like, I know as somebody who's, like, pretty introverted, it's hard for me once I go out and I'm somewhere, like, I will talk to people, of course, and, like, then I get, like, all excited, like a little Labrador puppy. I'm like, "Oh my god, who are you?" And, like, "Who are you?" But to get me to that point of going out is pretty hard. So, like, anything like, I loved that aspect of the pandemic, like, that really did kind of, like, enlighten me a lot about myself, where I was like, "Okay, like, I really enjoy this, like, being virtual and being able to connect with people, and it's so easy to, like, hop on, like, I get to, like, be home already, I don't have to drive back home after this," right? So,
yeah.
like, yeah, I love that aspect.
What's been like some of your favorite memories or moments from the podcast that you've had?
So hard, like, I don't know, like, everything, everything is. I think truly okay, I don't think that I knew this in the moment, just like with every story, right? But like really like learning how to do it. I think like because I'm obsessed with having interviews and I'm obsessed with, all of that. Like that's like such a given. But the process of learning how to do this, like I have a little highlight on my Instagram and like the podcast highlight. The very first picture is like a selfie when I got my mic in the mail. Like I came home from work one night and I literally like came home and it was like on my porch and I'm like the smile is just like the most authentic biggest smile I've ever had. And like but then it's like okay, like how do I learn how to use this mic? Like there's like 10 million different settings on this thing and like how do I do this? And then the editing, like I still use GarageBand cuz that's just how I was taught in Keisha's course. But like I had to learn like so intricately, like the little, like where to splice it and how to like put it
Yeah.
back together. And like, just it was honestly like at the beginning of the editing, especially, it was like hard. Like I was just like, how am I ever going to learn this? And I actually had like a friend of mine teach me how to do like the not like auto tuning, but there is like you can put filters, like just to enhance the voice and like make it a little bit more clear and stuff like that. And I was like, how do you do all of this? It was like, whoa. And so I remember being really frustrated and like, but put, like, I don't want to use the word pushing through. It's so anti regulation, right? But literally just continuing to like show up and continuing to learn and like continuing to try and like not give up. I think that's something like I learned a lot about myself and I'm just not techie. I'm like I just want to come and like record and have a conversation. I don't want to like do all this. And you can outsource that stuff nowadays. Like I've even had people outsource it to me, but I'm like, I want to do it myself. Like I want to like be hands-on and like learn how to do it. So, yeah, that's probably been like one of the most fulfilling parts is like really just doing it and sticking it out because like how we were talking about earlier, like at the very beginning, you don't really see that many views and you're just starting and you're like, am I talking to the void? And then you like look back and you do see that growth and you're like, oh, this is like really cool. Like this feels really fulfilling that like I didn't give up.
Yeah. I think I saw recently there's like a metric of, I think most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes or something. And so when I made it past the 10 episodes, I'm like, woohoo.
Oh, 10. Yeah. And that's how you start to change that rank, like your episodes and how consistent you are and all of that stuff. And I'm like, dang, like I remember when I looked up and I was just like, what percentage? And I was like, oh my God, but that's why. It's because like, the consistency and like just showing up consistently, make it past the 10 episodes. Like, yeah, just you have to want to do it, right? Like it shouldn't be something I truly believe like it shouldn't just be something that we just do to have like another part of our funnel, or to have another part of, people finding us, or, whatever, like, or just to say we have a podcast. Like, it should be something that we want to do. Like what we're doing right here is like, I can obviously, like, you enjoy it so much, and like, it's obvious. So yeah, you should do it like for you.
Big thank you to Audrey for her time and her patience with all the technical issues. Unfortunately, that was the end of the episode, or at least all that the recording was able to get. And so I highly encourage y'all to check out Audrey's page. You can find her on Instagram at Hello Audrey Rose, which I'll link in the show notes, obviously. And please be sure to check out the Rise Happiness Summit coming in July. I believe those dates are July 17th through the 20th or 21st. The tickets are free, and I will link that in the show notes as well. I will be one of the keynote speakers there, doing a talk on breath work and how it can help in nervous system regulation. And so thank you again to Audrey for your time, and for sharing all your wisdom and stories. And if you want to check out her podcast as well, I will link that as well. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to like, share, subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening to or watching this on. And hopefully we'll get past all of these technical issues that I've been coming across lately. But so hopefully we won't have any more in the future. But until then, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the episode and to share your thoughts as well. I'd love to hear if there's anything in particular that stuck out to you that was helpful for you. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.